Hello, everyone. We're back. It is Tracy broadcasting live from New Hampshire Writers Project headquarters. And as you may be aware, we have all kinds of live broadcasts we've been highlighting this month for our holiday showcase. And we are back with another one of our featured members. This morning, we're talking with Robert Napolitano. How are you, Robert?
I'm very good, Tracy. Thank you for having me on.
It's great to have you here, and I'm really interested in learning about your writing career. I know you have several books that are out, and we were chatting here before we went live about how unique and individual each one of them is. So it'll be really interesting to talk about that. But before we do, if you could share with us a little bit about your writing career and how you got to this point in your profession.
Well, I didn't start writing novels until I was retired, actually, which was about 10 years ago. I got an idea for something. Before that, I had published several newspapers in my area of Londonderry, New Hampshire, or in this area of New Hampshire. And I did the writing for that, sports usually, stuff like that. So I've always had interest in writing, but I didn't have the time to put into a novel. But then when I retired, I had an idea, and I'll show you the book. It's called The Twins, and that's it. And it was about a conspiracy theory about the towers, when they came down and whatnot. And people had talked about that for years. And I said, I have an idea for something. So I did it. But I'll tell you, I didn't have an ending. All right. Start the book without an ending, and that was a mistake.
Huh.
And it drove me crazy until I finally came up with an ending. And I made sure I've written six or seven books since then. I always start with a beginning and an ending, and then I do the middle. You don't start without an ending. I learned that lesson.
It's like the two pieces of bread, the sandwich, but
Yep.
it's like, I don't have this piece of bread over here. I'm not sure what type of bread I'm going to use. That's an
Yep.
interesting. So that's a usual, I guess, is that a strategy that most authors assume they need before writing a book? You need the beginning, you need the end, or it's kind of like free flow. You just never know where it might go.
Yeah, there's people that like to do it that way. And I saw an interview with Grisham, and he said the same thing. I have an ending or I don't start the book. And
Okay,
I've learned
interesting.
that you have to have that. And thank God I came up with that one. And it was a really good ending, but it took me a while to get to it. And especially with something that's based on facts, that kind of a thing.
Makes
And
sense. Well,
then
then going into your second book, did you have an ending going into that one?
no, I had written the book, and I said, "That's it. I'm good. I've written a book, and that's fine." And I self-published it. I didn't get an agent or anything like that. I self-published. And somebody said, "Well, you're working on next?" I said, "I'm not. I'm not working on anything." And then I saw something on the internet, and that ended up being Gerben. Okay, and what I saw was this legend of Sawney Bean, which is a Scottish legend from the late 1500s. And something happened, and I don't want to give the story away or anything like that, but something happened. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting if something like that was brought to New Hampshire in the 19s, and in the New World, actually come to the New World. And that's what happened. I brought this legend. People from it came to the New World and eventually migrated to a small apple growing town in New Hampshire. And the horror continued, because it is a horror book. It is brutal at times.
Oh,
So I brought it that way. And that's what gave me that idea. And the third book was Leopold Christ. This came about during COVID, when we have all these experts telling us certain things, and there are people that are saying, "Oh, I don't believe any of that nonsense." So I said, well, you know what? Let me write a book that's could be earth-shattering if it's true, but nobody wants to listen to what's going on. And that's where Leopold Christ came from. He knows what's happening, and nobody wants to listen to this old fellow that knows what's going on. So that's where that came about. After that, we did the Sons of Abraham, and I'll tell you, because we're doing a podcast now, this is how this came about. I'm with a group called Write Free or Die, and we are a group that critique each other's works. All right, we're a terrific group that's here in Derry, and it was during the winter, and we're doing a Zoom call because
okay.
the weather was too bad to travel, because we do meet at Marion Garris Center. Anyways, Well, everybody's on the screen and we're talking and we're doing this. And one of our lady authors is talking, and into the picture comes another one of her twin sister. And it just struck me. I said, "This is wild." So I wanted a story came to mind that I would do twins, but I wanted to use the title "Sons of Abraham." So to do that, I had boys instead of girls, and I have Isaac and Ishmael, and you have the good twin and the bad twin, and it becomes a thriller. And if you read it a second time, it's a horror once you know the ending. So that was fun. That's where that one came about. And from there, we went to the one that was this book was the Disappointment of Annie Brooks. This was nominated for. It became a finalist in New Hampshire Writers Project for top three.
Yep.
Anyways, that came about on as even though I'm retired and old, there is a senior league of softball down in Nashua, and we play down the Cape in September. Go to a tournament. And one September, I'm down there, and that morning I had that off. We were playing in the afternoon, and I went for a walk along the beach in Falmouth, and saw the houses and the dunes and everything, and something came to mind. And this book is about a retired school teacher in Falmouth who has been there for years, and she's lived on the beach. She's living in the house she grew up in, and she's a very private person, but she has had an impact on the community. And a reporter, Laura Kingston, wants to do a story on her about her life. Well, Annie's not really pleased about that because Annie has secrets. And as we come to find out, Laura has secrets too.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a bit of a thriller. So that's how that one came about. And then we were talking, people were asking me, well, what about this and what about that? You're going to do a book about this? You're going to do a book about that? And actually what happened was, as you can see from this, just to give the woman on the beach, all right, I had no cover. The book was being done and I had no cover. And I happened to run into somebody over in the casino, a woman that her husband, I know her husband in softball. So I said, where is he? Where's Donnie? Well, he's out taking pictures. I said, what do you mean he's taking pictures? He's a photographer. I said, get out of here. So he comes into the casino and he says, what are you doing? He says, well, you working on another book? I said, yeah, I'm finishing it up. And I need a cover. I said, I need a woman walking on the beach. So he gets his wife, Cheryl. She walks along the beach and he takes the picture and that becomes the cover. Well, when I deliver the book to him, thanking him for the cover and whatnot, they loved it. He says, so what are you working on? I said, well, I want to work on a serial killer, but I'm not really, I don't know anything about police procedure. Not that I want it to be a police procedure book. I want it to be a book about the mind and of the killer and what promotes them into that. So he says, well, ask me. I was a detective for 15 years down in Nashua. I said, oh, well, there we go. And then I ran everything through him. So the same thing. So that's how Annie Brooks came to be.
Okay.
And then the serial killer, which is the one we talked about, is the universal killer, and that's set in Manchester. And I posed the bodies all over the place. This came to be from something I saw on eBay, which is this is what I did when I was a kid. There's models of Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman and all that. They were plastic models that you could build from the 60s. This is what I built when I was a kid. So I said, there's a story here. So I used the monsters and the films as the series to set the bodies in different places in Manchester. And they're from scenes from the movies of the Universal pictures that were made. And Universal made all those. And actually Frankenstein saved the studio from going bankrupt. So that's where that came about, which led to me, again, I finished that up. I don't have an idea for another book. And I sold a book, one of my first editions. I collect Agatha Christie. I sold one of my first editions to a gentleman in Portland, Oregon. And I get this lovely email from him saying, I've been out here all my whole life. And I said, well, my son's out there with my grandchildren. They live in Portland. So he sends me another email, and it's filled with stuff about Portland, Oregon in the turn of the century, 20th century, where they were a huge shipping port. And on the rivers, there was this lighthouse at the convergence of the Willamette and the Columbia River in Portland. It's no longer there. And he talked about river pirates, brothel barges, opium trade, all this stuff that was going on in the rivers. And I said, you know what? There's a book there. So that's the newest one, which is The Lighthouse Keeper. And that's the lighthouse right there that was at the convergence of it. This is what's left.
Interesting.
And I took that picture in January. And this one came from the Historical Society. Now, here's a quick thing about the Historical Society. And this is set, again, in the early part of the 19th century. 1920s, 1920s. It was built in 1895 and came down in 1955. Anyways, I go to the Historical Society in Portland, the Oregon Historical Society, and I said, I'm looking for information on the Willamette Lighthouse. They had no idea what I was talking about.
Huh.
Two gentlemen, in fact, I put a little dedication in there to them, had no idea what I was talking about. I said, no, just go on the internet and check it out. They went wild. They saw this thing and they said they're talking to each other back and forth. You got to come see this, come see this. They brought me out this thing. They had no idea it was there because it's not there anymore. So that's where that came about. And the one I'm working on now, real quick, is called, actually, I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but it's set in Revere Beach in the 1980s, 90s. And it's where I grew up. I grew up in Everett. So it's like a homage to my youth and what was going on. But this is going to be a detective book. He's a detective and he runs into a woman in a bar on the beach, and it goes from there with things that are going on. So that's where I get my inspiration from. I have no idea where it's coming from. These are standalone books. I don't want to do a series at all because I grew up reading Jules Verne, and then as I got a little older, like I said, Irving Wallace and Harold Robbins and Neville Shute, Frederick Forsyth, I've always liked, and those are all standalone books. So that's what I enjoy doing.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, if you're just joining us, we are talking with Robert Napolitano, author of The Disappointment of Annie Brooks, and he is one of over 55 authors who are being featured in our holiday showcase on our website at nhwritersproject.org. Head on over and take a look at some very unique works for that book lover on your gift list. And in the meantime, you can be supporting the literary community, which we appreciate. So, Robert, tell me, do you paint yourself into any of the characters in any of your novels?
No, I don't think so. No. Almost all my characters, in fact, all of them, they're just regular people. They don't have any special gifts. There's no psychicness. There's nothing like that. These are just regular people who find themselves in situations not of their own doing. And then they have to get out of it. And give you an example. In Gervin, my main character is a woman. And she has to do something at the end of the book, which is extraordinary. Now, I don't believe anybody should just say, oh, that happened. How did that happen? Where did she get that power? Where did she get that strength? So I have her do something a little earlier that shows that she can be tough when she has to be to protect her children. Well, something happens at the end where she has to be tough again. And I don't like anything that comes out of the blue. I try to set everything up. I try to plot the book along where it's just regular people and things happen. Like I do in real life, things happen. But the books are pretty fast paced. When I see someone that's reading my book on the Kindle, you can tell what they're doing. They go through the book in usually 2 days, 3 days. There's no 30 pages yet. No, they go through the book. It's quick. And these are 100,000 words, but they go through them quick. Yeah.
Well, I love how you describe it. Regular people
Yeah.
and you're writing a story about them. Yeah, that's very interesting. And so if you want to learn more about Robert and his books, you can check him out at goodreads.com, or you can find all the information on amazon.com as well.
And I do
Robert,
have
this
the
is
books in the Bookery and in
okay.
Gibson.
Okay.
And now the new Manchester Craft Place, which is a terrific little place in the mall, Manchester Crafts. So I've got the books there.
Awesome.
And in the libraries. I put them in the Londonderry Library and the Derry Library for anybody that doesn't want to buy them.
Fantastic.
They're for free.
Well, it has been wonderful talking with you, Robert. Thanks for taking time out of your day to speak with our community. We appreciate it.
Thank
you. Thank you everyone for watching us today. We hope you have a wonderful holiday.